My daughter said, "I invited my stepdad to your birthday party. He gives me joy that you can't give me. Behave yourself." I looked at her, nodded and smiled. A few minutes later, her stepdad walked in with my ex-wife. I smiled at them and let them sit down. What happened next was rather unexpected. I will tell you everything. First, let me quickly thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. It will be great if you can leave a comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout out in our next story. Today's special shout out goes to Dave Veltman from London. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's go deeper into the story. I've always believed that when you give someone your name, you're giving them more than letters stitched on a birth certificate. You're giving them history, a foundation, a promise. I gave my daughter, Maya, my name when she was born, held her in my arms the moment the nurse swaddled her, and whispered, "She's mine." Back then, it felt like nothing could touch that bond. Not sleepless nights, not the arguments about parenting styles, not even the quiet resentment that began to grow between me and her mother after the honeymoon phase evaporated. But as I stood in my kitchen last week, holding a cup of black coffee and looking out over the backyard where Maya used to run through the sprinklers, barefoot and free, I realized something. My name had stopped meaning anything to her the moment another man gave her what she thought I couldn't. Joy. That word, joy, tore through me like broken glass. She said it over the phone like she was delivering a pizza order, like it was no big deal. "I invited Derek to your birthday party. He gives me joy that you can't give me. Behave yourself." I didn't even respond at first. I let the silence hang there like fog because I didn't trust what would come out of my mouth. Then I chuckled. Not because it was funny, but because I needed something to mask the heat rising up my throat. "All right," I said. "Thanks for letting me know." I hung up before she could add anything else. For a moment, I just stared at the phone in my hand, half expecting it to melt. I must have stood there for 10 minutes before I moved. I wanted to scream, punch a wall. Instead, I put my phone down, sat at the kitchen table, and stared at the wood grain like it could offer answers. How did we get here? The thing is, Maya used to light up when she saw me. I was the hero who picked her up from school, the guy who let her have ice cream before dinner when her mom wasn't looking. I remember when she was 8 and had a fever so bad she couldn't sleep. I stayed up all night with her, holding her hair back when she vomited, reading her stories between doses of Tylenol, whispering, "Daddy's here. I've got you." You don't forget moments like that. They imprint themselves on your soul. And yet, none of it seemed to matter anymore. Somewhere along the line, Derek, my ex-wife's husband, the man who married her 2 years after our divorce, became the one she turned to for comfort, advice, laughter. I didn't even realize how far I'd fallen in her heart until she said it out loud. "Joy that you can't give me." That part played in my mind like a looped track. I wasn't even mad at Derek, really. He didn't steal her. She offered herself up to him. Maybe he was smoother than me. Maybe he bought her things I never could. Maybe he told her what she wanted to hear. But I was the one who changed her diapers, who taught her to ride a bike, who drove her to prom and cried the whole way back home. You don't forget those kinds of love. But apparently, you can replace them. When Maya was little, she used to ask me, "Daddy, will I always be your girl?" I used to answer without hesitation. Always. No matter what. I realize now that I probably should have asked her the same question. Would I always be her dad? Her protector? Or was I just the man who held the first spot in line before someone better came along? Maybe that's the part that hurts most. Not the betrayal. Not even the humiliation. Just the quiet, brutal realization that I'd been replaced in a role I thought was unshakable. People talk about heartbreak like it only happens between lovers. But let me tell you, when your child looks at another man like he's the one who raised her, it's a different kind of pain. It doesn't break you. It hollows you out. Still, I didn't show it. Not to her. Not to anyone. I spent the next few days pretending I was fine, even though something in me had shifted. I smiled through the planning of my birthday party, picked a venue, sent out invitations, even ordered a custom chocolate cake that said, "New Year, New Joy." Part sarcasm, part mantra. I told myself I wasn't going to let Maya ruin this for me. It was just a party. Just a few hours. I could fake peace for that long. But even as I told myself those lies, I started digging through my old files, ones I hadn't touched in years. Photos, court documents, and finally, the video. I found it on an old USB drive buried in the back of my desk drawer. Grainy footage, recorded by a private investigator I had hired when my gut wouldn't let me sleep. I hadn't watched it in years. Didn't need to. I remembered every second. My wife, now Maya's beloved stepmother, wrapped in the arms of a man who wasn't me. Laughing, kissing, like our marriage had never existed. I'd never shown the video to Maya. I didn't want her to see her mother that way. I wanted to protect her, preserve her image of the woman who gave her life. But after that phone call, after those words, I started to wonder if I protected the wrong people all along. Reggie, my best friend since college, came over that Friday night. He brought beer and a bad attitude, like always. We sat on the back porch while the sun disappeared behind the fence, casting long shadows on the grass. "You're not seriously letting this clown show up to your party, are you?" he asked. "It's your birthday. Your day. Don't let them hijack it." "She's still my daughter," I said, though the words felt heavy and foreign on my tongue. "Yeah? And what are you to her?" "Her ex-dad." He shook his head. "You're too damn nice. Always have been. Maybe it's time you stop being the bigger man." I didn't respond, but something about what he said lodged itself in my chest. Maybe I'd been quiet too long. Maybe dignity wasn't enough anymore. Maybe the only way to be heard was to be loud, not with volume, but with truth. I didn't sleep the night after Reggie left. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the slow, monotonous ticking of the clock on the nightstand. Each second thudded like a heartbeat in my ears. I used to love the quiet. It made me feel settled, grounded. But that night, the silence wasn't peace, it was pressure. A dense, pressing stillness that sat on my chest like grief. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face. Not my ex-wife's, not Derek's. Maya's. That same little girl who used to run to me when she scraped her knee, who once clutched my hand so tight during a thunderstorm I thought she'd never let go. And now she barely looked at me like I was anything more than a nuisance. Or worse, an obstacle to her joy. I thought about those words again, that phrase she lobbed at me like a rock. Joy that you can't give me. I didn't know that joy had conditions. I didn't know it came with a job title that I'd somehow lost without even being told. The thing about betrayal is that it never arrives loud. It doesn't barge in and announce itself. It drips in slowly, like a faucet you didn't notice was leaking. One day, everything's dry. The next, the floor's warped, and you're standing ankle-deep in the rot. When Maya first started spending more time at her mother's house, I didn't think much of it. She's growing up, I told myself. She needs her mother right now. Then came the days she stopped returning my texts as quickly, the calls that went unanswered. The birthday, I sent her flowers and she posted a picture of Derek's gift instead, some expensive bag I'd never even heard of. I chalked it up to distance. Maybe college. Maybe new friends. But the truth was uglier. She wasn't drifting. She was choosing. And the choice was no longer me. I kept trying, though. That was my mistake. I kept thinking that if I just showed up, if I kept being present, reliable, consistent, she'd come back around. I never badmouthed her mother. Never once told Maya about the nights I slept alone while my wife claimed she was working late. I never mentioned the fights behind closed doors, the hotel receipts, the sudden change in perfume. I protected her from all of it. I thought that was what a good father did. But what did it get me? A lecture on how to behave at my own birthday. A daughter who spoke to me like a warning label. Behave yourself. She said it like I was the threat. Like I was the one who couldn't be trusted with decency. Saturday morning, I stood in front of the mirror and tried to imagine what my father would have said if he were still alive. He was a hard man. Quiet, stern, but proud. Never let people walk over him. He once told me, "A man's silence can be holy. But if it starts to feel like a muzzle, rip it off." That stuck with me. I remember him throwing my uncle out of the house one Thanksgiving when he disrespected my mother. Didn't raise his voice. Didn't throw a punch. Just told him, "You don't get to eat at a table you spit on." That's what this felt like. Like I was setting the table for people who had already decided I wasn't worth respect. And I was supposed to smile and pass the salt? I went down to the venue later that day to make sure everything was set. It was a cozy little place, wood-paneled walls, warm lighting, enough space for 50 guests, but intimate enough to feel personal. There'd be drinks, music, catered food from my favorite soul kitchen. Nothing fancy, just meaningful. I met the coordinator, walked through the setup, approved the decorations. All the while, I kept picturing how it would go down. Where Maya would sit. Where Derek might post up, acting like this wasn't all built on top of my pain. Where my ex-wife, Simone, would casually laugh as if this was all perfectly normal. It made my skin itch. I could already feel the small talk scraping against my patience. Later that evening, Reggie called again. "You sure you're going to be good?" he asked. "I still think you should have told Maya to uninvite that clown." "I told her she could do what she wanted," I said. "So can I." He was quiet for a beat. "You gonna play the video?" That stopped me. Not because I hadn't thought about it, but because it was the first time someone said it out loud. I didn't answer right away. I watched the sky darken out my living room window, the clouds turning bruised and purple like they knew something was coming. Finally, I said, "I don't know." "I mean, I get it," Reggie said. "You've taken the high road for years. But sometimes people need to be reminded why you took it. You didn't walk away because you were weak. You walked away because you were strong enough to leave with your dignity. That don't mean they get to dance on your name." He was right. But I wasn't sure if showing that video was about dignity or something darker. Was I trying to reclaim my story? Or was I just finally fed up with being the guy who took all the punches and still smiled through it? Maybe both. All I knew was that the man Maya remembered, the dad who fixed her bike and showed up to her recitals, that man was still inside me. But now he was standing behind a line that had been crossed one too many times. That night, I pulled out the USB drive again, sat down at my laptop, pressed play. The footage was grainy but clear enough. My ex-wife, Simone, wearing a red blouse I'd bought her for our anniversary, laughing as she kissed a man I'd never met. They were in a hotel lobby. She looked free, unburdened. Like our life together had been a costume she was relieved to shed. I watched the whole thing without flinching. When it ended, I sat there for a while, the screen fading to black, my reflection staring back at me. I didn't feel angry, just hollow, like the last drop of denial had finally evaporated. And that's when I knew. I wasn't going to beg for love anymore. I wasn't going to tolerate being the side character in a story I built with my own hands. If they wanted to come into my home, my celebration, with their smiles and secrets, I wasn't going to stop them. But I wasn't going to sit quietly either. Not this time. The morning of the party, I woke up to an eerie calm. You know that strange peace before a thunderstorm hits? That moment where everything feels still, even beautiful, but you can smell the electricity hanging in the air? That was me, sitting on the edge of the bed in a crisp button-down shirt, watching the sunlight crawl across the hardwood floor like it had no idea the world was about to tilt sideways. I went through the motions, showered, shaved, ironed my pants, polished my shoes. On the outside, I looked like a man ready to celebrate. But inside, I was standing on a wire, swaying between restraint and revenge, wondering if either would make me feel whole again. I arrived at the venue 30 minutes early, just to walk the space before the guests arrived. I needed to breathe it in while it was still mine. The room was beautiful, simple. Strings of warm lights curved across the ceiling, casting a golden hue over the polished floor and deep mahogany chairs. Each table had small white candles and framed photos. Me with Maya as a baby, me and my parents, even one of me fishing with Reggie back in college. They told my story, or at least the version I used to live in. The DJ was setting up in the corner, the smell of barbecued ribs and mac and cheese drifted in from the kitchen, and I took one long, deep breath. For a brief moment, I felt good. Like maybe tonight could be something different. Maybe it didn't have to be a war zone. But I knew better. The moment Maya walked in, everything shifted. She was radiant, I'll give her that. Black dress, confident smile, hair curled just like her mother's. She hugged me quickly, one of those awkward, half-hearted gestures that says, "I'm here, but don't expect much." Then she turned and, with far too much excitement, welcomed Derek in through the door like he was a celebrity guest on some daytime talk show. He strolled in wearing that smug, toothy grin I'd grown to hate over the years. And just a few steps behind him came Simone, my ex-wife, looking like betrayal dipped in gold. Her dress shimmered like it was laughing at me. I didn't move. I didn't greet them. I just nodded once, slowly, and returned to my table. It's a strange thing, watching your past and present sit side by side. Like watching a ghost take a seat next to your future and pretend they belong there. Derek and Simone acted like nothing was off. They greeted a few guests, laughed with Maya, even complimented the decorations. Maya bounced between tables, showing them off like trophies. I could feel the heat crawling up my neck, but I smiled. I smiled so hard my jaw ached. Because sometimes, when you know the punchline, you let the joke play out before you deliver it. Reggie showed up 15 minutes later. As soon as he walked in, he scanned the room, locked eyes with me, and nodded once. No words, just a look that said, "I'm ready when you are." That's the kind of friend you need for nights like this. Someone who doesn't need an explanation to understand what you're about to do. He took a seat near the front, drink in hand, and kept his eyes on the stage where I was supposed to give my speech. I made the rounds, shook hands, thanked people for coming. I laughed a few times, took pictures, played my part, but every step felt like a rehearsal for the real moment, the one that would change everything. I finally stood near the front, clinking my glass gently to get everyone's attention. The room quieted, slowly, like a wave pulling back before it crashes. All eyes turned to me. Maya beamed at me from across the room, like she was proud of me for holding it together. Derek had one arm casually slung around Simone's shoulder. I let that image settle in my mind, then took a deep breath and started to speak. "Thank you all for coming," I began, voice steady, measured. "It means a lot to have so many faces from different chapters of my life gathered here today. Some of you have seen me at my best. Some of you have seen me at my lowest. And some of you, well, you were my lowest." A few people chuckled, thinking it was a joke. But I didn't smile. Tonight's not just about celebration. It's about truth. And I think it's time some truths finally came to light. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the USB drive. My hand didn't shake. I walked over to the laptop connected to the projector, slid it in, and hit play. The screen flickered for a moment, then filled with the grainy footage I knew all too well. Simone, the hotel, the other man, the kiss, the laughter, the undeniable betrayal. You could hear a pin drop. Gasps spread like wildfire. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Simone shot up from her chair like someone had lit her dress on fire. Derek's arm dropped from her shoulder like it was too heavy to hold. "What the hell is this?" Simone barked, eyes wild, cheeks flushed. I didn't answer. I just stood there, letting it play. Letting everyone see what I'd been carrying for years while smiling through birthdays, holidays, custody exchanges. I didn't owe anyone an explanation. Not anymore. Maya jumped up next, tears brimming. "What the hell are you doing?" she screamed. "You're humiliating her. You're humiliating me." "No," I said, finally turning to face her. "I'm telling the truth. Something none of you seemed too interested in before you decided who gets to give you joy." She shook her head, angry, broken. "You're heartless. You're just bitter." "Maybe," I said. "But bitterness didn't cheat. Bitterness didn't lie. Bitterness raised you. And all it ever asked for in return was respect." She stormed out of the room. Simone followed, spitting curses under her breath. Derek looked like a child caught stealing. I didn't even look at him. I turned back to the guests, smiled, and said, "Now, if you'll excuse me, I'd like to introduce someone who reminds me that love doesn't have to come with betrayal." Then I held out my hand, and Denise, my new wife, walked up beside me. Elegant, composed. She didn't need to say a word. Her presence was enough. I wrapped my arm around her and said, "This is Denise. She's been by my side for 3 years. And she's the reason I'm still capable of believing in something good." And just like that, the party had a new mood. The whispers didn't stop. Some people left. Others stayed, unsure what to do. But I didn't care. I'd told my truth. Finally. And the weight I'd carried for years felt a little lighter. When you pull the trigger on something like that, something irreversible, there's a strange silence that follows. Not relief, not regret, not pride. Just this deep, echoing quiet like your soul is listening for the pieces to hit the floor. After I played that tape, after Maya screamed, and Simone stormed out and Derek shrank into the corner like a man who finally realized he wasn't bulletproof, that silence wrapped around me like a second skin. I stood there at the front of the room with Denise at my side, staring out at a crowd that didn't quite know whether to applaud or leave. A few people looked at their phones, some avoided eye contact altogether. One woman, Simone's cousin, I think, muttered something under her breath and left without saying goodbye. But most just stayed, frozen in that awkward space between curiosity and discomfort. And I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I let them sit in it. Denise squeezed my hand gently. That small gesture, just her fingers brushing against mine, grounded me in a way I hadn't expected. She wasn't part of the war, didn't know the years of gut punches I'd taken, the way I'd forced myself to smile while the world I built crumbled around me. But she stood there anyway, not asking for an explanation, not judging the wreckage. Just there. And in that moment, it hit me. Sometimes love isn't about rescue or repair. It's about presence. Quiet, solid presence that says, I see you even now. After a few minutes, people started moving again. Conversations restarted, softer than before. The DJ, unsure of what the hell to do next, put on a slow track, something instrumental, maybe hoping the absence of lyrics would soften the tension. Reggie made his way up to me with a drink in each hand, and that familiar smirk stretched across his face like he'd been waiting years to see me finally swing. That, he said, handing me a glass, was a damn masterpiece. Whole room didn't know whether to pass out or clap. I laughed, but it wasn't joy. It was that sharp kind of laughter that comes when you've cried all the tears you're ever going to cry. I didn't do it to hurt her. I said, not sure if I meant Simone or Maya or both. I just needed them to know. They know now, he said, clinking his glass against mine. And maybe now you can stop bleeding for people who never once brought you a bandage. That line stuck with me. I carried it with me for the rest of the night. I watched people slowly return to their food, awkwardly sip wine, start conversations about anything but what had just happened. But it lingered in the air like smoke. A few folks came up to me with cautious praise. You handled that better than I would have, one man said. Took guts to finally show the truth. Another woman, someone I barely recognized, whispered, I always wondered what really happened with y'all. Now it makes sense. Everyone wanted to touch the fire without getting burned. But I didn't care. Let them see what truth looked like after years of swallowing it. Maya didn't come back. Neither did Simone. I checked my phone once, hoping, maybe foolishly, that there'd be a message. Some acknowledgement. Some flicker of the daughter I used to know. But there was nothing. Just a blank screen and the faint vibration of silence stretching between us like a chasm. I knew that was coming. I'd accepted it the moment I pressed play. But acceptance doesn't make it hurt less. It just makes it bearable. Later in the evening, Denise and I danced. Just the two of us at first. Then a few brave couples joined in. Her head rested lightly against my chest. And for a few minutes, I forgot what the night had been. I forgot the looks, the whispers, the whole Maya left when she walked out. I focused on her rhythm, her breath, the way she made even broken things feel like they could be beautiful again. You okay? She asked quietly. I don't know, I said. But I'm not sorry. You shouldn't be, she replied, eyes closed. Truth doesn't have to be polite. I kissed her forehead and let that line echo in my mind. Truth doesn't have to be polite. For years, I'd buried mine under layers of diplomacy. For Maya's sake. For appearances. For peace. But peace that requires your silence is just slow death. And I wasn't dying anymore. As the party wound down, I thanked the guests who remained, posed for a few pictures, even laughed, genuinely, for the first time in a long while. Not because everything was fixed, but because something had finally snapped into place. My spine. My voice. My sense of worth. I didn't need Maya's approval. I didn't need Simone's performance. I had shown the truth. What they did with it was their burden to carry now, not mine. Back at home, hours later, Denise went upstairs to change while I sat alone in the living room with a glass of whiskey. The house was quiet again, but this time, it didn't feel like pressure. It felt earned. Like I'd finally cleared out all the ghosts that had been squatting in my heart. My phone buzzed once. I looked down. It was Maya. Her message was short. You humiliated me. I can't believe you'd do that. Don't contact me again. I stared at the screen for a long time. Read the words over and over. My thumb hovered above the keyboard. I thought about saying I was sorry. About explaining why I did it. About reminding her of all the years I bit my tongue for her. But I didn't write any of that. I just locked the screen and placed the phone face down on the coffee table. Because sometimes, silence isn't weakness. It's the last word. There's something oddly sobering about the day after you tear everything down. I woke up early, well before Denise, and sat on the edge of the bed just listening to the weight of the quiet house. Not the peaceful quiet from the night before, when the last guest had left and Denise and I had fallen into bed tangled in each other's arms, still buzzing from the adrenaline. This was the kind of silence that stung. A hollow, echoing quiet that made every creak of the floorboards sound like judgment. I walked into the kitchen and brewed a pot of coffee, watching the dark liquid swirl like it held answers. My hands were steady, but my chest carried something heavier than caffeine could fix. I'd done it. I had finally spoken the truth. And now I was left with the echo of that truth, loud, lonely, and irreversible. I checked my phone even though I told myself I wouldn't. Maya's message from the night before still sat there like a bruise. You humiliated me. I can't believe you'd do that. Don't contact me again. I hadn't responded. Part of me wanted to. Not to apologize, but to explain. To say, this isn't about hurting you. It's about freeing myself. But explanations are like bandages on people who already decided they want to bleed. She'd made up her mind. I was the villain now. The father who couldn't behave. The bitter ex who torched the party instead of letting it coast quietly into another year. And maybe that was fine. Maybe being the villain was better than being invisible. Denise came downstairs an hour later, barefoot, wearing one of my old college sweatshirts. She didn't say anything at first. Just poured herself a cup of coffee, kissed my cheek, and sat across from me at the table. I could feel her watching me, the way you watch someone who just survived a wreck and doesn't yet realize they're alive. How are you feeling? She asked finally, voice soft, like she didn't want to scare the answer. I shrugged. Empty, clear, strong, guilty, all of it at once. She nodded like she understood. You did what you had to do. Did I? I looked up at her, and for the first time since the party, let the cracks show. Did I really have to do it that way? You told the truth. That's all you did. You didn't shout. You didn't scream. You just showed them who you are, who she was. And if the truth broke the room, maybe the room deserved to break. I leaned back in the chair, letting her words soak in. Denise didn't have a stake in this family drama, and that's exactly why her perspective cut through the fog. She wasn't bitter. She hadn't lived through the unraveling of a marriage, the slow alienation of a daughter, the constant rewriting of history by people who wanted to paint me as angry or cold because I refused to play along. She saw it as it was. A man reclaiming his voice in a room that had long since learned to ignore it. Still, the pain lingered. Not from Simone or Derek. I didn't care what they thought. They'd built their relationship on my wreckage, and whatever shame they carried now was theirs to unpack. But Maya, that was different. She wasn't just my daughter. She was the last piece of my old life I still fought to protect. And in trying to protect myself, I'd shattered whatever fragile bridge still connected us. The truth had a cost, and I paid it with the only currency that still mattered, my relationship with her. I opened Facebook later that afternoon and saw that Maya had posted something. It was vague, the kind of post meant to draw sympathy without offering detail. A black screen with white text. Some people will ruin everything just to feel powerful. Some wounds don't deserve forgiveness. The comments flooded in, friends and family who didn't know the full story, offering hugs and hearts and promises that she was better off without the drama. No one asked what happened. No one cared about the other side. Just the image of a heartbroken daughter and a father who'd betrayed her in public. Reggie saw the post too. He texted me a screenshot with a simple message. Don't let that drag you backwards. You already made it through the fire. But fire has a way of sticking to your skin, even after you're out of the blaze. I sat on the back porch with my coffee cooling in my hands, staring out at the grass Maya used to play in. I remembered her 10th birthday, when I set up a bounce house in that same yard. She'd hugged me so tight that day, face painted like a tiger, whispering, "You're the best dad ever." It felt like another life. I wondered if she remembered it too, or if those memories had been overwritten by newer ones with Derek in the spotlight, giving her the joy I apparently lacked. What did that mean anyway? Joy. Did she mean laughter? Security? A sense of ease? I never claimed to be a clown. I never tried to buy her love. I gave her what I had: time, presence, consistency. I thought those things mattered. I thought love was more than who showed up with the flashiest gift or the smoothest jokes. But maybe I was wrong. Or maybe she just outgrew the version of love I offered. Either way, I couldn't compete anymore. And I wasn't going to. Later that evening, Denise and I ordered takeout and ate in front of the TV. Something normal, something human. She reached over and rested her hand on my leg halfway through the movie. No words. Just touch. Just understanding. I looked over at her and said, "You know she might not come back from this." She turned to face me, eyes steady. "Then she wasn't really yours anymore. Not in the way you hoped." That hurt more than I wanted to admit. But I nodded, because she was right. I never thought I'd look back on my own birthday and think of it as a funeral. Not for me, but for the version of myself I spent years keeping alive for other people. The man who played nice, who bit his tongue, who showed up with a smile while everyone else rewrote history in their favor. That man was laid to rest that night, quietly and with no apology. And in his place stood someone I hadn't been in a long time, someone honest. Honest enough to burn the bridge if it meant no one else got to walk across it and spit in his face. I didn't regret what I did, not even after the silence stretched longer than I expected, not even after Maya made good on her promise and didn't contact me again. Because some truths don't need applause, they just need to be told. Loudly. Finally. The days that followed were a strange mix of lightness and loss. There was no more pretending, no more chasing someone who had already chosen to walk away. But grief is still grief, even when it's necessary. I missed her. I missed her laugh, her questions about the world, the way she used to call me Pops when she wanted something. I even missed the small things, the forgotten coffee cups she left in the car, the inside jokes that only existed between us. Those memories didn't vanish just because she did. They lingered like ghosts, soft and persistent, reminding me of a time when things were simple, when I was still her anchor. Now, I was just the man she warned people about on social media. I ran into Simone about a week later at the grocery store. It was one of those unfortunate coincidences you can't avoid in a town too small to disappear in. She spotted me before I could duck down the next aisle. She looked tired, older somehow, like the mask had finally slipped. No makeup, no curated smile. Just a woman caught between shame and spite. She didn't speak right away, just stared at me like she was trying to read my intentions. Then, without warning, she laughed. Not a joyful laugh, not even a sarcastic one. It was bitter, hollow, the kind of laugh that carries regret but refuses to name it. "You really had to do it that way, huh?" she said. I didn't answer right away. I took a step closer, close enough to speak, but not enough to suggest warmth. "You really had to cheat and lie and pretend you didn't?" I asked. Her smile disappeared. "That was years ago." It was never about the years. It was about the way you kept rewriting them. She rolled her eyes and muttered something under her breath, then pushed her cart past me. No apology, no admission, just more deflection, more denial. And for the first time, I didn't care. I didn't feel the need to correct her version of the story, because I had finally told mine. And this time, people listened. Denise and I started talking about moving. Not out of town, but maybe to a different part of the city. Something smaller. Something new. The house I was in now still echoed with old footsteps. It had too many memories tucked into its corners. Some beautiful, some unbearable. I didn't want to erase the past. I just didn't want to live in a museum anymore. Denise was open to it. Always supportive, never pushing. She had this quiet strength I leaned on more than I realized. And though we never talked much about that night after the first few days, I could tell she understood exactly what it had cost me. Not just my daughter. Not just my reputation in the eyes of people who only knew one side. But a piece of myself I had tried so hard to keep noble. It was gone now. Burned, buried, and maybe that was okay. One evening, about 3 weeks later, I received a card in the mail. No return address, just my name written in soft cursive. I knew it was from Maya the moment I held it. There was no letter, no apology, just a single photo tucked inside. It was a picture of us from her 10th birthday, the day I set up the bounce house in the backyard. She was on my shoulders, arms in the air, laughing like the world couldn't touch us. On the back of the photo, she had written, "I don't know how to forgive you yet. But I remember this. I stared at it for a long time, my hands trembling just slightly. It wasn't reconciliation. It wasn't healing. But it was something. A flicker in the darkness. A sign that maybe, just maybe, the story wasn't finished, just paused. I didn't reach out. Not because I was angry, but because I finally understood that love doesn't always mean chasing. Sometimes it means standing still and letting the other person come when they're ready. If they're ready, and if they never do, you still stand. You still breathe. You still build a life worth living. I kept the photo. Framed it, actually. Placed it in my study next to a newer one. Me and Denise on the night of the party, arms around each other, smiling in a room full of whispers. 2 photos. 2 lives. Both mine. Both real. I didn't need to choose between them anymore. I just needed to accept that I could honor the past without living in it. So yeah, my birthday felt like a funeral. But not for me. For the silence. For the pretending. For the version of me who kept waiting to be chosen. That man is gone. And the one who remains? He knows his worth now. He speaks when it matters. And most importantly, he never hands his peace to people who can't carry it. Some people say telling the truth will set you free, but what they don't tell you is that freedom often comes at a cost. This father chose truth over comfort, boundaries over blind loyalty. And in doing so, he may have lost a daughter, but he found himself. If you've ever been forced to choose between protecting your peace and keeping the peace, you know how deeply this story cuts. If it spoke to something real in you, like, share, and subscribe for more stories that don't shy away from the messy side of family. Because sometimes, the only way to heal is by breaking the silence. See you soon in the next story.